Okay, so now that we've talked about function, let's talk a little bit more in depth about form class words. We're not going to cover them all because some of them are just fairly standard. Things like the determiners, prepositional phrases, those really don't change a whole lot. Interjections, I mean, we only have a limited amount of question words and things like that. So we're going to look more specifically first at nouns. So I've got up here a traditional definition, person, place, or place, thing, or idea. And for the most part, that's a pretty good way of thinking about a noun. When we really think about a noun, we have some series of words. So cloud, some series, a sound, some phonemes strung together that to us signifies in our brains, hey, this fluffy thing up in the sky. So all in all, that's a pretty solid way of thinking about a noun. There's a reason a lot of people still teach it like that, but they can also be a little more nuanced than that. And also, as linguists, they always want a scientific way to classify things. So let's take a look at a modern definition. A modern definition of a noun is any word that can be made possessive or plural. So something that either needs to be able to own something else and possess it. So here we look down here at a base noun plus a possessive inflection, cats, the cat's chair, things like that. And then down here we have bear, base noun, adding a plural inflection to become bears. And we all know, we could have plenty of irregular things here and different ways that we would have to, different other standards of language that we would have to deal with to make something plural or possessive. But on the whole, if it can be done, typically that means that it's a noun. Now, adjectives have traditionally been described as words that describe nouns. Most of the time, again, that's not a bad definition for adjectives. But if we think back to our functions, we also know that adjectivals as a whole can also be things that aren't just single words. So that something that's performing the function of an adjective isn't necessarily going to look like this. But when we're talking about the forms of an adjective, it's any word that can take comparative or superlative endings. So something that can, like quick, become quicker or quickest, or small become smaller or smallest. Adverbs, again, when we look at the traditional definitions for a lot of these things, I mean, they're still pretty spot on. I mean, it's definitely an easy way of breaking down what this particular kind of word does for sentences. So adverb, a word that modifies a verb. Now, these are typically not as easy to classify. It becomes a catch-all for a lot of words, and I'll give you some examples here in a second. But some common endings that we are probably all familiar with are the ly endings, so quick becoming quickly, loud becoming loudly. Now, we say that because I say that it's tricky to classify because we have some of these forms right here, but other words, like when we think back to one of our example sentences, yesterday. Now, depending on how that's used, we could definitely consider that a solid adverb. It could definitely be a nominal as well. It could be yesterday, and I'll just abbreviate this, was hot. So there we have, it being the subject of a sentence, it's performing a nominal function. But then in our example, we had yesterday, somebody did something else. And it's very possible that this could also be classified as an adjective. So it's easy to see how a lot of things that answer some of those questions would get just sort of by default dumped into this category. Oh, sorry, too far. The last thing we're going to look at is verbs. So traditional definition of verb would just be an action word, and I think I opened up iPhoto. We'll see if I can close that here in a second if it pops up. So traditional definition would be any action words that we have. But so when we look at form class verbs, we're going to look for things that take different verb endings like the past tense or present progressive. So here we have grab, grabs, going to grabbed, grabbing, yell, yells, yelled, yelling. Then we also, of course, in English and in a lot, I'm sure most other languages, I don't know about all languages, but have irregular verbs. So run goes to runs, but then instead of going to runned, goes to ran.